Hey, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Today we're gonna be going through a 23 fortified Underrot. First pack, there's like 4 important mobs. One of them is the Maggot. It does a frontal that's quite wide, and it will one-shot anyone who gets hit by it, pretty much. There's the Matron, which is the highest health mob. It also has a very small frontal, this one. You need to dodge that or you will die as well. There's the Priest, which is the caster of the group. You need to just interrupt like any cast, don't worry about each one. Just interrupt anything and it gets locked. And this tank will also pull the ticks here. What the ticks do is they're going to apply a very nasty dot on the tank. It keeps stacking up. And also, when they explode, when they die, I mean, they explode for a lot of damage on everyone. So when they're about to die, like here, you're gonna see all of this damage happening. You're gonna want to use a defensive when that's happening, or you may die. Other than that, on the first pack, I prefer actually targeting not the Matron, but everything else. I try to kill everything else quickly, so that we can move with the for the second pack with the Matron. We chain that Matron into the second pack instead of trying to finish it off, because it just has far too much health anyway. So I prefer chaining like we're going to be doing here. The tank is going to pull that Matron into the next pack after everything else is dead. Like that. And then it's the same mobs, Priest, Matron, and then another one of those inconsequential mobs. Now for the third pack, there is one new mob, which is the Spirit. It cannot move from that center area, and it has 2 abilities. One of them is interruptible, the Harrowing Despair right there, and then it casts a Dark Omen. It targets a player, and that player has a circle around them. Whatever is inside that circle, any other player gets damage, so you just want to move away from that, and you want to use a defensive when you are the target. That's it. First boss. It's a pretty simple boss, not too much to it. It's very easy to. It casts the Blood Bolt. Just interrupt it. Nothing else to it. It's gonna have Sanguine Feast. That ability is not a too large circle around the boss, but anyone who is within that circle will just pretty much guarantee a die. That rogue didn't die because he has cheat death, but he would otherwise have died. And then it's gonna have another ability, the Creeping Rot, which is another circle, but it's goes away from the boss after the cast is complete. And the final ability is the boss creates a clone of itself with way less health. You want to kill it, but you don't need to hard nuke it. Just slowly kill it with AoE abilities. And that's the boss. Now for the packs after the first boss, you're gonna have quite a few different mobs. You're gonna have these rods, which just put stuff on the ground, like that green circle right there. It's just a void zone, you don't want to be in it, it damages you. Now the Lashers, they cast Decaying Mind, which is a stun on a player. I'm gonna get it right now. It's a stun for 30 seconds that can be dispelled by a priest or a healer, but you want to interrupt it if you can. For the following few packs, you're going to have the Rot again, you're going to have the Lasher, the Maggot from the first pack, that is the frontal, and you're going to have a new mob, this Blood Swarmer, is it called? It does 2 things. It has a Fixate on a player, it deals melee damage. So if you're squishy, if you're like a cloth wearer, you're going to be dealt a lot of damage if you try to tank it. If you're a plate class, you can pop a defensive and just face tank it, and you'll be fine. The other ability it does is that Sonic Screech right there. The tank interrupted it just then. What it does is damage to anyone, I think a few yards close by. And also it interrupts spellcasting, which is going to prevent you from casting if you're a caster. Before the second boss, people will typically do a pack before the boss for bloodless timings. There's one caster in this following pack, the Death Speaker. The cast itself, I think it just does gives haste to the mob, or maybe it's AoE, I'm not sure. Just interrupt it. And then it does another thing that is not cast, but it puts a dot on a player, which can be dispelled by anyone who can dispel magic. It deals very high ticking damage. Also, something else that happens in this pack is the skeletons get very large shields. If you have a priest of any kind on your group, you should dispel that bone buff that they have. It's a magic effect that can be dispelled by anyone who can dispel magic. And now onto the boss itself. This is maybe the most challenging boss on the dungeon. It's very, very dangerous. So you need to respect it quite a lot. So let's see that charge again. How you should position this boss is this spot is quite good. It's what typically where you typically play it. The boss has a charge ability that goes on anyone who's not a tank. So you will see us positioned in between the tank and this wall, so that the boss will not travel the entire room, and we don't have to chase it. And this other ability that he does with the charge is he spits out a whole bunch of bugs. Now, what you want to do is you want to walk over the bugs, all of those bugs with a red, like kind of almost like a pillar thing, whatever. You want to walk over them as well with the indigestion. That indigestion is different. It goes on the tank only. It's a frontal on the tank, whatever he's positioned. It also casts the bugs, and you need to squash them as well. It has a third ability, which is a tantrum, which is going to happen in a few seconds. It's also going to spread bugs everywhere. But now the boss is just going to travel very far off. And you will have to chase all of those little bugs and squash them. If you don't squash a bug, what's going to happen is that it's going to be creating a tick, like you saw in the very first pack of the dungeon. And they are extremely dangerous. As you see, one appeared right there. It's gonna hurt the tank a lot. And it exploded for a little bit of damage. Next pack, we're gonna see a new mob now. It's going to be a worm of sorts. It has, if I'm not mistaken, 2 different casts. The Dark Echoes is extremely dangerous. It's a very, very short cast. You can see the cooldown for that ability on my nameplates right there. It's really important. There needs to be an interrupt saved up for that. It's extremely dangerous. The other cast is far less dangerous, the Void Spit. It's not that big of a deal. Before the third boss, we see a new mob here, the Defilers. They have a Shadow Bolt cast, which is not too important. What is important is that Withering Curse. As the name implies, it is a curse. And what it does is, besides, I think it deals damage, I don't even remember. The most important part about it, though, is that it applies a damage reduction debuff on everyone, and it stacks up. You absolutely want to interrupt that. And if it does go through, again, it's a curse. Someone can maybe dispel the curse. If you're a paladin, you should just divine shield that. Otherwise, there's also a totem that is cast. You don't need to worry about it at all. Just don't be within the totem and you don't have to worry about it. Third boss time. So what this boss is all about is just taking care of mushrooms that spawn. There are those green mushrooms all around that circle. How you deal with them? Well, this tank is just popping Divine Shield and going through all of them. For this first set. And that goes terribly. Are we resetting? We're not resetting this? No. Okay. So there's this these 2 arrows the boss puts on 2 players. And what it does is leave a zone below you when it expires, and that zone is just a circle that also destroys mushrooms. So you want to destroy mushrooms in that way. More mushrooms will always be spawning like this. And you want to always deal with as many of them as possible, actually just all of them. So if you have upheaval, you go there. You don't need to worry about having to use a defensive, but maybe in hierarchies with tyrannical you want to. These circles that spawn every so often, DBM will tell you when it's gonna happen. Just dodge them. Dodge them. If you get hit by them one or more, you get the stacking dot, which is a disease, and it deals a whole bunch of damage, so dispel it if you can. This festering something deals a bunch of AoE damage. It doesn't seem to be the most deadly, but you know, if you can use a defensive for that. I'm not sure if I mentioned the shockwave the tank gets thrown on them. The shockwave is just a frontal that the boss does, and the boss itself is going to destroy the mushrooms like that with the shockwave. Last pack of the dungeon, you're gonna have a worm again, you've seen it before, and you have two big burly corruptors. The corruptors have two abilities. One of them is a frontal. They turn purple, and they do a frontal where they're facing. It's extremely dangerous. And you have to make sure you're always looking at them and seeing if they're doing the frontal. And they also cast tentacles on the ground that go where a player was. And then they smash the ground in the direction the player was. So how you want to deal with that? Ideally, it's kind of hard, but you want to stack with all of the melee players. If you have the range stack in one player, but just try to follow the tank, for example. And then once the cast goes off, you just move slightly to the side. That's how I found for it to be ideally played. Stack on one player, move to the side slightly when something happens. Because it's very hard to see where the tentacles are, what way they're going to smash. So you have to have foresight on what's going to happen. You cannot really react to it, in my opinion. I can't anyway. And the last boss. It has a frontal. The frontal is not very visible, but DBM will be quite loud about it. So you just move to the side with that one. The boss puts stacking debuffs on all the players, and they take 4 light damage. They're also magic debuffs, by the way, so a priest can mass dispel everyone. You'll see this cleansing light around one player. It moves around with you, and whoever is inside that circle of light gets all of the dots, all of the debuffs dispelled from them. The boss will spawn these visage mobs every so often as you deal more and more damage to the boss. So, by the way, you only want to damage the boss. Only the boss throughout the entire fight. All of those spores you see everywhere, they're completely inconsequential. You don't damage them, you don't look at them, they don't exist. Okay, so now the boss is at 31%. Every time you kill one of the mobs that spawn, not the spores though, the visage, the boss is going to take, I think, 32% of its health in damage. That's how you kill the boss. The boss, you need to always be dealing damage to it for it to spawn the visage ads. But then it's when you kill the visage ads that the boss is going to take the damage. That's when the boss's health is going to be reduced. And they take 32%, I think, of their total health in damage. So let's see if we can find that final mob right there. See it again. It spawns right there. We start attacking it. When it dies, there's a frontal right there. When that ad dies, the boss just evaporates. And that's the dungeon.